May 27th, 2015. Just before 6 a.m., Zurich, Switzerland. The Baur Lac, a five-star hotel on the edge of the lake. One of the most expensive addresses in the country. Plainclothes police walk through the lobby. They take the elevators up. They knock on doors. Behind those doors are some of the most powerful men in world football. They flew in for the FIFA Congress. The vote to re-elect the president is 2 days away. The police are not local. The warrants came from the United States. The men aren't walked out the front. They're taken through a side entrance into unmarked cars. And as they go, hotel staff hold up bedsheets, plain white linen, to block the cameras already waiting outside. Billionaire-adjacent football executives, leaving a five-star hotel behind a bedsheet. Here's the strange part. Nothing the police found that morning was hidden. The votes, the money, the tournaments. It had all been happening in plain sight for over 2 decades. So today we're not asking who got caught. We're asking how a non-profit, on paper the same legal category as a local chess club, ended up controlling a $7.5 billion global economy, and how one man's cat apartment became the loose thread that unraveled all of it. Meet Chuck Blazer, American, Brooklyn-born. For years, one of the most powerful officials in CONCACAF, the governing body for football across North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. General Secretary from 1990 to 2011. A member of FIFA's Executive Committee, the small group that ran the sport globally from 1996 to 2013. Blazer did not live like a sports administrator. He lived like a head of state with an expense account that never got questioned. He kept an apartment on the 49th floor of Trump Tower in New York. $18,000 a month. That wasn't the unusual part. The unusual part was the second apartment. Same floor. $6,000 a month. That one wasn't for Blazer. It was for his cats. He traveled with a pet macaw named Max riding on his shoulder. He kept 2 more parrots at home. Photographers loved him. He looked, by most accounts, like exactly the kind of guy who'd end up at the center of a corruption case. Larger than life, impossible to miss, hiding absolutely nothing about how well he lived. Which raises the obvious question. If a man is renting a second luxury apartment for his pets, where is that money actually coming from? The answer, prosecutors would later say, was bribes and kickbacks, funneled through marketing deals, tournament rights, and World Cup bids, going back more than 20 years. But in the early 2010s, nobody outside a small circle of football insiders knew any of this. Blazer was untouchable. Until he wasn't. To understand how Blazer, and dozens of others, got away with it for so long, you have to understand what FIFA actually is. Not a government, not a corporation, not in the way you'd expect. FIFA is a non-profit association, registered in Switzerland. On paper, it's in the same legal category as a hiking club or a chess federation. It has one job that actually matters. It owns the World Cup. And the World Cup isn't a tournament, it's an economy. The 4-year cycle around a single World Cup brings FIFA around $7.5 billion. Television rights, sponsorships, marketing deals. Almost all of it tied to 1 month, in one country, once every 4 years. Which means the single most valuable decision FIFA makes isn't who wins on the field. It's who gets to host. For decades, that decision came down to FIFA's Executive Committee, around 24 men, voting by secret ballot. No public record of who voted for what. Almost no outside oversight. An enormous prize. A private vote. You don't need a conspiracy theory to see what happens next. You just need to understand incentives. Prosecutors allege that's exactly what happened around the 2010 World Cup bidding cycle. A $10 million bribe scheme connected to South Africa's winning bid, funneled in part through accounts tied to Blazer and his CONCACAF counterpart, Jack Warner. A separate kickback was allegedly tied to Morocco's failed bid for the 1998 tournament. None of this required breaking into anything. It required a handful of people with enormous, unchecked power over billions of dollars, and no one checking whether they were selling their votes. That's not the scandal. Prosecutors would later argue that was the design. In 2011, the FBI and the IRS came for Chuck Blazer. He wasn't just facing racketeering exposure. He was facing tax evasion charges that alone could have buried him. Years of income, never reported. Blazer had a choice most people in his position make eventually: fight or cooperate. He cooperated. Starting that year, without FIFA or his colleagues knowing, Blazer began working for investigators. At the 2012 London Olympics, he reportedly wore a keychain with a microphone hidden inside it, recording conversations with the same football officials he'd spent decades doing business with. The man at the center of the excess was now the government's inside man. In November 2013, Blazer pleaded guilty: racketeering conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, money laundering conspiracy, and 6 counts of tax evasion. At that same hearing, he disclosed that he was fighting rectal cancer. His plea stayed sealed. Publicly, Blazer was still just a retired football executive. Privately, he'd already handed prosecutors 2 years of recordings, documents, and testimony, the foundation for a case that was about to become the largest corruption prosecution in the history of organized sports. Which brings us back to that hotel. May 27, 2015. The U.S. Department of Justice unseals an indictment naming 14 defendants, FIFA officials and sports marketing executives. The charges describe a scheme reaching back to 1991, bribes and kickbacks totaling more than $150 million, tied to media rights, marketing deals, and tournament votes. At the press conference in Brooklyn, the head of the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division put it bluntly: this was, in his words, the World Cup of fraud. Among those named, Jack Warner, Blazer's longtime counterpart and a FIFA vice president. Warner has denied all wrongdoing. He fought extradition from Trinidad and Tobago for years and has never stood trial in the United States on these charges. That distinction matters and will hold to it throughout. Indicted is not convicted. Some of what follows is allegation, not proven fact, and we'll be clear about which is which. What's not in dispute is the scale. 14 defendants that morning, dozens more indicted in the years that followed. A system that prosecutors described as rampant, systemic, and deeply rooted. Not one bad deal, but a way of doing business for a generation. Which brings us to the 2 tournaments everyone actually wanted answers about. December 2nd, 2010. FIFA's Executive Committee gathers in Zurich to award 2 World Cups in a single afternoon. 2018 goes to Russia. 2022 goes to Qatar, a country with no real football history and summer heat that would eventually force the tournament to move to winter. FIFA hired an American lawyer, Michael Garcia, to investigate the bidding. He spent nearly 2 years on it. He submitted a report. FIFA didn't publish it. It published a summary, written by someone else. Garcia publicly called that summary incomplete and erroneous. Then he resigned. In 2020, U.S. prosecutors filed an updated indictment. It alleged that bribes had been paid to FIFA officials specifically to secure votes for Russia's 2018 bid and Qatar's 2022 bid. To be clear, that's an allegation from prosecutors, not a court finding. Qatar has consistently and categorically denied any wrongdoing in winning its bid. Russia has denied wrongdoing as well. Both tournaments went ahead. Neither host has been found by any court to have bought its vote. Chuck Blazer died in July 2017 at 72 after a long battle with cancer. He never faced the sentencing hearing prosecutors once expected, but his cooperation had already reshaped the biggest corruption case sports had ever seen. Sepp Blatter, FIFA's president since 1998, was never criminally charged in the American case. FIFA's own ethics committee did ban him over a separate 2 million franc payment to former UEFA president Michel Platini. Both men were banned from football. When that payment was finally tried as a criminal case in a Swiss court in 2022, both were acquitted. FIFA promised reform. Some of it was real. Host nation votes opened up to the full membership instead of a small committee. But the prize is still the prize. And in December 2024, FIFA confirmed the host for the 2034 World Cup, Saudi Arabia, running effectively unopposed for the biggest tournament in the sport. Nobody had to sneak that one out a hotel's side entrance at dawn. It happened in daylight, on a stage, with a press release, which might be the real lesson buried under all the bedsheets and handcuffs. The 2015 arrests were treated as the moment the corruption got exposed. But it was never really hidden. It lived in the structure, and the structure is still standing. If this kind of story pulls you in, power, money, and the paper trail that eventually catches up, there's more where this came from. Subscribe if you want the next one, and drop a comment. Which case should we break down next? All footage licensed through Pexels.com. Full source list and photographer credits below. Thanks for watching.